He said it like a business deal. You're not in it anymore. My own father, cold as a contract. And my mother? She adjusted her pearls and thanked me for coming, like I'd just delivered bad soup instead of giving them 20 years of my life. But the worst part? Jason didn't even flinch, just sipped his scotch and smirked while a stranger handed me the will. No apology, no shame, nothing. That's when I saw it. The law firm's logo. They'd hired the wrong attorney, and I'd once trained under the right one. I didn't scream. I smiled. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Jana Morrigan, and I'm 38 years old. Every Sunday, I drive 15 minutes to my parents' house with fresh groceries and a smile that never quite reaches my eyes. My mother, Eleanor's crisp voice carries through rooms as I fold her linens, while my father, Gerald, hums off-key, tinkering with that perpetually loose porch light. My younger brother, Jason, swoops in monthly, usually needing money, and somehow leaves with both cash and praise despite his string of failed ventures. I watch them fawn over him, their golden child, while I quietly maintain their lives. But they forgot something crucial about me. Before I became an elder care specialist, I worked in estate law. That knowledge sits in my chest like a warm coal. But let me start from the beginning. The text message from my mother arrived on a Tuesday evening. Family discussion this Sunday. Important. Be here at 2. No explanation, no context, just that familiar clipped tone that always set my teeth on edge. You know that feeling when your whole body tells you something's wrong before your mind catches up? I spent the rest of the week distracted at work, checking my phone more than usual. Even my favorite resident at the care facility, Mrs. Chen, noticed something was off when I accidentally poured her chamomile tea twice. Your eyes are somewhere else today, dear, she said, patting my hand. She was right. Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that usually lifted my spirits. The maple trees lining our street had turned that rich amber I remembered from childhood, when Dad would rake massive piles for Jason and me to jump in. These days, I was the one who handled the yard work while Jason breezed in and out of their lives like a pampered houseguest. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 2 o'clock, punctual as always. Jason's flashy red sports car was already there, parked carelessly across 2 spaces. Through the front window, I could see him sprawled in Dad's leather armchair, drink in hand, looking like he didn't have a care in the world. My mother opened the door before I could knock. Jana. She gave me that thin-lipped, almost smile that never quite reached her eyes. Come in. The living room felt different somehow. Tenser. Dad sat ramrod straight on the couch, while Mom perched beside him like they were posing for a formal portrait. A man I'd never seen before stood near the fireplace, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in our modest home. My stomach clenched. Who's this? I asked, trying to keep my voice light as I settled into the remaining armchair. Charles Whitman, the man replied smoothly. Family attorney. Family attorney? We'd used the same local lawyer, Margaret Peters, for 20 years. She'd handled everything from property transfers to my parents' original will. I glanced at Jason, but he just took another sip of what looked like scotch, avoiding my eyes. Dad cleared his throat. We've made some changes to our estate plan. The room seemed to shrink. Mom's jewelry clinked as she adjusted her necklace, a nervous tell I'd noticed since childhood. Your father and I have been thinking, she began, her voice precise and rehearsed, about legacy, about the future of this family. What kind of changes? I asked, though part of me already knew. We've decided Jason is better positioned to carry on the family legacy, Mom continued. Her words fell like ice cubes into a quiet room. He'll be taking over the estate, the house, the savings, everything. I blinked. Taking over? What about, you're not in it anymore? Dad cut in flatly. The new will removes you entirely. The air left my lungs. 20 years of Sunday visits, grocery runs, doctor's appointments, yard work, emergency calls. All of it crystallized into this moment. Jason finally looked at me, a flash of something like guilt crossing his face before he covered it with another sip of scotch. I don't understand, I managed. Why? You chose your career over family, Mom said, as if that explained everything. Always so independent. This house needs someone who'll preserve its meaning, its traditions. Mr. Whitman stepped forward, extending a thick manila envelope. If you'll just sign here, acknowledging receipt of the notification. My hand shook slightly as I took the pen. Training from my elder care work kicked in. Stay calm, stay professional, process emotions later. I signed where he indicated, barely registering the firm's logo at the top of the page. Thank you for coming, Mom said, already standing, dismissing me. Like I was a slightly disappointing dinner guest rather than their daughter of 38 years. I rose mechanically, clutching my purse. The room felt unreal, like I was watching everything through water. Jason didn't even get up to say goodbye. Dad suddenly seemed very interested in straightening a stack of magazines. I'll show you out, Mr. Whitman said, that same smooth smile in place. He held the door open, waiting expectantly. I paused on the threshold, the autumn air sharp in my lungs. Through the window, I could see Mom already straightening the cushion where I'd sat, erasing any trace of my presence. My vision narrowed to the thick stack of papers Mr. Whitman was spreading across the coffee table. Each document felt like another brick in the wall they were building between us. Remember how your hands used to shake during confrontations? Mine were steady now. Too steady. Like my body knew this wasn't just anger. This was survival mode. As you can see here, Whitman droned, pointing to various paragraphs with a manicured finger, the amended trust agreement effectively redistributes all assets previously allocated under Section 4.3. He kept talking, piling term upon term like he was building a fortress of legalese. You know that moment when someone's trying so hard to confuse you that it actually makes you focus harder? That's where I was. The more he threw around phrases like contingent beneficiary designations and testamentary capacity, the more familiar this game felt. I'd seen attorneys like him before, back in my estate law days, the ones who thought complexity could mask questionable choices. Of course, he added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, we've included a no-contest clause. Any challenge to these provisions would result in automatic disinheritance. He paused, probably expecting me to ask what that meant. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Mom sat there nodding along like she actually understood what he was saying. Dad kept checking his watch. Jason had wandered to the kitchen for another drink, this whole thing apparently beneath his attention. The sun through the window caught Mom's reading glasses, and for a second I remembered helping her pick those frames out last spring. How she'd squeezed my hand and said I always knew what was best for her. Funny how fast always can turn to never. If you'll examine page 17, Whitman continued, sliding another document toward me. That's when I saw it. The letterhead. Browning and West, attorneys at law. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral. Something from my old life was trying to surface, a detail I'd filed away years ago. Then it hit me. Summer of 2018. I was still doing estate work, reviewing firm credentials for a multi-state case. Browning and West had come up, and there'd been an issue with their licensing. Something about jurisdictional requirements and state bar registrations. I'd flagged it, but moved on to a different firm. The memory was fuzzy, but the core fact remained. There had been a problem. I looked at Whitman with new eyes. His confidence suddenly seemed less like expertise and more like overreach. He was still talking, explaining how they'd streamlined the disposition process to minimize administrative burden. Each word dug their grave a little deeper, and he didn't even know it. "Do you have any questions?" he finally asked, capping his Mont Blanc pen with a click that echoed in the quiet room. I shook my head, managing a small smile. "No, I think you've made everything quite clear." My voice came out soft, resigned, exactly what they wanted to hear. He extended his hand, and I shook it. His grip was too firm, too assured. Mom and Dad exchanged satisfied glances. They thought they had won, thought their quiet daughter would just fade away like she always did. The old Jana might have. "We trust you understand this is for the best," Mom said, standing to signal the end of our meeting. Her pearl necklace caught the light, the one I'd helped Dad pick out for their 30th anniversary. "Jason needs this security. You've always been so capable on your own." I nodded, gathering my purse and the copy of documents Whitman had provided. Each step toward the door felt like walking through deep water, but my mind was racing ahead, already mapping out next moves. I'd need to verify that licensing issue, would need to check current statutes, would need... Drive safe, Dad called after me. Like this was just another Sunday visit wrapping up. Like he hadn't just tried to erase me from the family's future. The door clicked shut behind me. In my car, I set the folder on the passenger seat, that Browning and West logo staring up at me like a challenge. My hands finally started shaking, Not from hurt, but from possibility. I barely remember the drive home. My hands gripped the steering wheel while my mind raced through dusty memories of legal statutes and jurisdiction requirements. The moment I stepped into my apartment, I dumped the contents of my old career box onto the dining room table. God, when was the last time I'd looked through these? The rubber bands on some folders had gone brittle, crumbling at my touch. The familiar scent of manila folders and printer paper transported me back to my estate law days. I used to love the precision of it all, how the right words in the right order could protect someone's wishes. Funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? My fingers found what I was looking for, a business card holder from my previous life. Most of the cards were outdated, but one name stood out, Ellen Tran. Last I'd heard, she'd opened her own practice focusing on estate litigation. More importantly, she'd been the one who'd first shown me how to spot the difference between aggressive legal strategy and outright overreach. I glanced at my phone. 9:47 p.m. Too late to call? I drummed my fingers on the table, remembering how Ellen used to say that hesitation was just fear wearing a watch. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled up her contact info and hit dial. She answered on the third ring. Jana Morrigan? It's been a minute. Her voice hadn't changed. Still that mix of sharp intelligence and warm humor that had made her such a great mentor. Ellen, I'm sorry to call so late, but you wouldn't if it wasn't important, she finished. Talk to me. I laid it out. My parents, the will, Mark Linton from Browning and West. Something feels off about their licensing status, I said. I remember flagging an issue years ago, but Browning and West? Ellen cut in. Mark Linton? The interest in her voice sharpened. Can you meet tomorrow morning? My office, 8 a.m.? My breath caught. You know something? Let's just say your instincts haven't gotten rusty. She paused. Bring whatever documentation they gave you. I barely slept that night. My mind kept circling back to that smirk on Linton's face. The way my parents had seemed so certain I'd just accept everything. By 7 the next morning, I was pulling into the parking lot of Ellen's firm. Her office suited her, clean lines, no pretense, just the tools needed to get the job done. She'd added some gray in her hair since I'd last seen her, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. Still take your coffee black? She asked, gesturing to a waiting cup. Some things never change. I set the folder on her desk. Ellen didn't waste time. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up the state bar registry. Mark Linton, she muttered, scrolling. Licensed in Illinois, Indiana, but not here. She looked up at me. Jana, when exactly did he present himself as your parents' attorney? Yesterday. He walked them through the whole amendment process. In this state? I nodded, watching her expression shift from professional interest to predatory focus. And he provided legal advice? Drafted documents? Each question was a nail in Linton's coffin. All of it. Even threw around some threats about a no-contest clause. Ellen leaned back, a small smile playing at her lips. The amended will isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Any legal documents prepared by an unlicensed attorney are automatically void in this jurisdiction. My hands started trembling. You're sure? She turned her monitor so I could see the statute herself. State Supreme Court ruling from 2019. They specifically addressed out-of-state attorneys trying to practice without proper licensing. She tapped the screen. The original will, the one that preceded this amendment, would still be in effect. The original will, the one where I was the sole heir, drafted back when my parents still saw me as the responsible one. Before Jason's latest charm offensive, my throat tightened. Ellen must have read something in my face. This isn't about revenge, Jana. This is about professional standards and legal rights. Linton crossed a line, and your parents let him do it. They must have known, I said, more to myself than Ellen. They went out of state for a reason. Probably thought it would make it harder to challenge. Ellen's voice had that teaching tone I remembered so well. But they got sloppy. Question is, what do you want to do about it? Ellen was still scrolling through property records when her fingers suddenly stopped. Jana, we have a problem. She turned the screen toward me. Your brother listed the house yesterday. My coffee cup clattered against the saucer. What? Multiple listing service. She pointed to the timestamp. Went live at 6 p.m. and... She clicked through to another document. There's already a pending offer. Closing date set for... Her voice tightened. Friday, 3 days from now. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of her desk. That fast? Cash offer according to this. No inspection contingency. Ellen's fingers drummed against her mouse. Once that sale closes, unwinding everything gets exponentially harder. We need to act before the transaction completes. I could picture Jason's face, that same entitled smile he'd worn when Dad announced the will changes. He's not wasting any time. Neither can we. Ellen pulled out a legal pad. I'll start drafting the injunction paperwork, but we need to slow things down. Buy us some breathing room. She looked up at me. Think you can get him talking? Find out what's really going on? My stomach clenched. The thought of playing nice with Jason after everything, but she was right. I'll invite him for drinks, make him think I'm coming around. Perfect. Get him comfortable, see what slips out. She was already typing. Meanwhile, I'll have these ready to file first thing Friday morning. I nodded, pulling out my phone. The text to Jason felt like acid in my fingers. Hey, been thinking. Maybe we should talk. Drinks at my place tomorrow night? His response came quickly. Sure, sis. 7 p.m. work? The casual tone made my jaw clench. Perfect. See you then. The next evening, I had 2 glasses of wine waiting when Jason knocked. He sauntered in like he owned the place, which I supposed he thought he soon would. The familiar scent of his cologne triggered a flash memory. Christmas morning, age 12, him accidentally breaking my new music box. Mom had called it clumsy. Dad had bought him a replacement gift. Looking better, he said, dropping onto my couch. Yesterday was rough, but you'll see. This is for the best. I handed him a glass, forcing my lips into a smile. Maybe you're right. I've been thinking about what Mom and Dad said. They just want to protect the family legacy. He took a long sip. I mean, you're great with the elder care thing, but that's not exactly empire building, you know? My fingers tightened around my stem. And you've got plans? Already in motion. He grinned, pulling out his phone. Check this out. Offer came in yesterday, full asking price, all cash. He flashed the screen at me. Closing on Friday, quick and clean. I made an impressed sound, though my stomach was churning. That's fast. Right? Guy's motivated. Some tech money from California. Jason lounged deeper into the cushions. Dad's lawyer, Mark, he helped push it through. Said we should lock it down ASAP. Of course he did. My wine tasted like vinegar. Sounds like you've got it all figured out. Always do, sis. He winked. Hey, remember when we were kids? You used to get so mad when things didn't go according to your perfect little plans. I remembered. I also remembered him stealing my college fund. Borrowing, Mom had called it, for his first failed business venture. Things change, I said carefully. Exactly. He finished his wine in one gulp. That's what I love about you, Jana. Always practical. No drama. He checked his watch. Speaking of practical, got a meeting with the buyer's agent. Need to push some paperwork through. As he stood, I saw that 12-year-old boy again, never facing consequences, always landing on his feet. Thanks for stopping by, I managed. Hey. He paused at the door. No hard feelings, right? It's just business. Just business. Like 2 decades of my life meant nothing. Right, I said. No hard feelings. The moment the door closed behind him, I grabbed my phone. Ellen, he's fast-tracking everything. Friday morning might be too late. Already on it, she replied. Meet me at my office first thing tomorrow. We're filing at 8 a.m. sharp. I hung up and stared at my half-empty wine glass. The ticking clock in my kitchen seemed louder than usual, marking off the precious hours we had left. I couldn't sleep after Jason left. Around dawn, I grabbed my jacket and headed to Stewart Park, the same place Mom used to take us for picnics when we were kids. The morning air held that crisp autumn bite that always reminded me of school supplies and fresh starts. The old bench by the duck pond still had that wobbly slat on the left side. I sat there, watching the water ripple in the pale light, and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. You know that moment when a truth hits you so hard it actually makes your chest hurt? This was worse. Every Sunday dinner, every errand run, every time I'd rearranged my schedule to help them, it all played through my mind like some bitter highlight reel. The time I'd canceled my vacation to help Dad recover from his knee surgery. The Christmas I spent tracking down Mom's lost medical records. 20 years of showing up, of being reliable, of choosing them first. And for what? To be erased with a signature? A jogger passed by and I realized I was crying. Not the dramatic TV movie kind of crying, just silent tears tracking down my cheeks. I wiped them away with my sleeve, feeling ridiculous. The ducks paddled closer, probably hoping for breadcrumbs. "Sorry, guys," I whispered. "I didn't come prepared today." That triggered another memory. Mom teaching Jason and me how to tear bread into tiny pieces so the ducks wouldn't choke. She'd been so patient then, so careful to make sure we both got equal turns throwing the crumbs. When had that changed? When had I become the placeholder daughter, the reliable backdrop to Jason's starring role? My phone buzzed. Ellen checking in. I let it go to voicemail. The weight of everything felt too heavy to carry, let alone discuss. The legal strategy, the careful timing, the whole chess game of it. Suddenly it all seemed exhausting. Maybe I should just walk away. Let them have their perfect son and their tidy narrative. Wasn't that easier than fighting? The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. A mother walked past with two small children, each clutching a different toy. "Share with your sister," she reminded the boy. He grudgingly handed over the red truck. My throat tightened. No one had ever told Jason to share with me. Not the attention, not the praise, and certainly not the inheritance. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how casually they'd done it. Like writing me out of their lives was as simple as updating a grocery list. No hesitation, no regret. Just cold certainty that I didn't deserve what they'd promised. I stayed in the park until my legs went numb from sitting. The phone buzzed again. Ellen, then a text. "We need to talk." Don't do anything rash. She knew me too well. I'd been sitting here for hours, talking myself into and out of a dozen different scenarios. Walk away, confront them, expose everything, hide forever. None of it felt right. I finally called her back around sunset. "Jana?" She answered on the first ring. "Where have you been?" "Processing." My voice sounded rough. "I don't know if I can do this, Ellen. Listen to me." Her tone shifted from worried to steel sharp. What they did wasn't just cruel. It was illegal. The law exists to protect people from exactly this kind of manipulation. Maybe it's not worth... Stop right there. I heard papers shuffling. You're not the one who should walk away from this. They're counting on you being too proper, too polite to fight back. But justice isn't about revenge, Jana. It's about restoration. Restoration? I watched the last rays of sun paint the pond orange. They took your place at the table. The law says you get to take it back. She paused. But it has to be done right, clean, by the book. I thought about Jason's smirk, about Mark Linton's knowing glance, about my mother's cold voice announcing my removal. The hurt was still there, but Ellen's words had sparked something else, a quiet, burning certainty. "You're right," I said finally. "We do this by the book." "Good." More shuffling. "Now come to my office. We've got work to do." I stood up, my legs protesting after hours on the hard bench. A family of ducks glided past, perfectly aligned, knowing exactly where they belonged. "I'm on my way," I told Ellen and headed for my car. Ellen spread the documents across her desk like a general mapping out battle plans. "Everything's in order," she said, tapping a stack of court-stamped papers. "Linton's license verification, state jurisdiction requirements, and the original will's reinstatement clause. They won't see it coming." I picked up one of the forms, scanning the legal language that had once been so familiar. "And you're sure about the timing?" "Positive. The moment they try to transfer the deed, we present this." She held up a blue-backed document. "Their entire amendment gets invalidated. The original will stands." My phone buzzed. Mom's number. I showed the screen to Ellen, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, I answered with carefully measured cheerfulness. "Hi, Mom." "Jana, good. We need help boxing up the dining room tomorrow." "Your father's back is acting up again." Of course it was. I'd been the family pack mule for 2 decades. "Sure, what time?" 9 should work. Jason's coming by later to review some paperwork, but we can be done before then." "Perfect." I kept my voice light, neutral. Like I hadn't spent 20 years memorizing every crack in that dining room ceiling while hosting their holiday meals. "See you then." Ellen raised an eyebrow as I hung up. "Packing duty?" "They want their faithful servant to help clear out the china." My laugh came out harder than intended. "Got to keep up appearances, right?" "Just 2 more days." She squeezed my shoulder. "Remember? Act normal, I know." The scent of fresh coffee hit me as her assistant brought in a new pot. It reminded me of Sunday mornings in that dining room, pouring Mom's favorite dark roast while she complained about the neighbors. I've had plenty of practice pretending everything's fine. The next morning, I pulled into the driveway at exactly 9. Mom was already waiting, arms crossed against the autumn chill. There you are. I've got the boxes ready in the dining room. I followed her inside, noting how she'd already removed most of the family photos from the walls. The ones remaining were mostly of Jason, his graduation, his brief stint in real estate, his entrepreneurial phase with that failed food truck business. Each venture celebrated despite ending in disaster. Be careful with the crystal, Mom instructed, hovering as I wrapped each piece in newspaper. They're antiques. I remember. How could I forget? She'd promised them to me on my 30th birthday. Another promise apparently worth nothing now. We worked in silence for an hour, the only sound the crinkling of paper and the soft thud of items being boxed. Around 10, Jason's BMW pulled up. I heard him whistling as he let himself in through the back door. Hey, look who's helping! He appeared in the doorway, grinning like this was all perfectly normal. Getting everything ready for the big move, sis? My hands stayed steady as I wrapped another crystal goblet. Just doing what Mom asked. Always the reliable one. He ruffled my hair as he passed, something he knew I hated. That's why we know you'll be fine. You've got your life all figured out. Mom beamed at him. Jason's already got plans for updating the kitchen. Maybe adding a pool out back. Think big, right? He dropped into Dad's old armchair, spreading out like he already owned the place. About time someone took the reins and brought this place into the modern era. I forced my face to stay neutral, though my stomach churned. 2 more days. Just 2 more days. The papers are ready for final review, he continued, pulling out a folder. Closing's all set for Thursday. You should come to the signing, Jana. Show your support. Oh, I'll be there. But I only smiled tightly. We'll see. Mom started gathering the wrapped crystal into boxes. Well, I think we're about done here. Thanks for helping, Jana. A clear dismissal. I nodded, gathered my purse, and headed for the door. Jason called after me. Hey, no hard feelings, right? You understand why they did this? I paused, one hand on the doorframe. Ellen's voice echoed in my head. Act normal. Keep cover. I turned back with what I hoped looked like resigned acceptance. Of course, family first, right? His satisfied smirk followed me out to my car. As I drove away, I checked my phone. A text from Ellen. Documents filed. Everything's ready. I typed back a quick response. Just saw them. They don't suspect a thing. I woke before my alarm, the late October sun barely touching my bedroom window. Sleep had been impossible anyway. My mind kept racing through Ellen's precise instructions, the documents we'd prepared, the timing we'd practiced. You know those moments when your whole life shifts? When you can feel the ground about to crack beneath someone else's feet? This was one of those. I chose my outfit carefully. A charcoal pantsuit I'd worn during my legal days, paired with my mother's old pearl earrings. A gift from happier times. The familiar weight felt right. Like armor. Ellen was already waiting outside the notary's office when I pulled up, her briefcase held close. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in her signature no-nonsense bun, and she gave me a quick once-over. Ready? She asked, adjusting her glasses. As I'll ever be. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Run it by me one more time? We stepped away from the entrance, finding a quiet spot near the building's corner. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from someone's chimney. It reminded me of helping Dad rake the yard every autumn, back when I was still his reliable girl. We wait until they're midway through the signing, Ellen repeated. Let them get comfortable. Then we present the jurisdictional violation and supporting documentation. The previous will automatically reinstate once we prove the amendment invalid. She squeezed my arm. Just remember, let me do the talking. I nodded, took a deep breath, and followed her inside. The notary's office was small but well kept, with dark wood paneling and the sharp smell of coffee from a pot in the corner. Through the glass partition, I could see them already gathered, Mom smoothing her skirt nervously, Dad reviewing papers with his reading glasses perched low on his nose, and Jason lounging in his chair like this was just another business deal. Mark Linton, their unlicensed lawyer, was there too. His smirk hadn't changed since that first meeting. We waited 5 minutes, just long enough for them to start signing the initial documents. Then Ellen pushed open the door, and I followed her in. The room went silent. Mom's pen froze mid-signature. Good morning, Ellen said pleasantly, setting her briefcase on the table. I'm Ellen Tran, a state attorney. I believe we have a serious matter to discuss before this proceeds any further. Jason straightened in his chair. Who are you? This is a private meeting. As I said, I'm an attorney. Ellen's voice stayed calm as she began laying out documents. And I'm here because the will amendment you're acting on isn't legally valid. Mark Linton stood up, his face flushing. Now, wait just a minute. Mr. Linton, Ellen cut in. Perhaps you'd like to explain why you're practicing law in a state where you aren't licensed? The color drained from his face. My mother's hand flew to her throat, clutching at her necklace, her tell when she's caught off guard. That's ridiculous, Dad started to say, but Ellen was already sliding documents across the table. Page 3 details Mr. Linton's current licensing status. Page 4 outlines the relevant statutes regarding unauthorized practice of law. Page 5 explains how this invalidates any legal documents he's prepared. Her finger tapped each paper in turn, including, of course, the amended will. Jason shot to his feet, knocking his chair backward. This is garbage. You can't just walk in here and... I can and I am. Ellen's voice could have frozen water. More importantly, the State Bar Association can and will be very interested in Mr. Linton's activities here. The notary, who'd been watching wide-eyed, carefully set down her stamp. I believe we need to pause this proceeding. Mom's face had gone pale. Gerald, she whispered to my father. What does this mean? It means, Ellen continued, that the amended will is void. Under state law, this automatically reinstates the previous version. She turned to me for the first time, the one naming Jana as sole heir. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the soft hum of the coffee maker, the sharp intake of Jason's breath as realization hit him. My father's hands were shaking as he reached for the documents. This can't be right. Every detail has been verified, Ellen assured him. You're welcome to have another attorney review it, of course. But I suggest you do so quickly, as continuing with today's sale would constitute fraud. Mark Linton was already gathering his things, avoiding everyone's eyes. The notary quietly began packing up her stamps and files. Jason's face had turned an ugly shade of red. You planned this, he snarled at me. You sneaky little... I'd be very careful about my next words, Ellen interrupted smoothly, especially given the current legal situation. The notary, a petite woman with steel gray hair and reading glasses, carefully gathered the half-signed documents into a neat stack. I cannot proceed with this transaction given the legal concerns raised. Her tone was clipped, professional. It would be improper for me to notarize any documents related to a potentially invalid will. My mother's fingers kept worrying at her necklace, twisting the small gold cross back and forth. Dad just sat there, staring at Ellen's papers like they might suddenly rewrite themselves if he looked hard enough. The coffee maker gurgled in the corner, an oddly domestic sound in this moment of unraveling. This is completely unnecessary. Mark Linton tried again, but his voice had lost its earlier smugness. He kept glancing at his phone, probably already drafting damage control emails to his firm. We can simply what? Ellen's tone could have cut glass. Continue practicing law without a license? That's a criminal offense in this state, Mr. Linton. Would you like me to cite the specific statute? She reached for her briefcase again, but he quickly shook his head. Jason wasn't taking it nearly as quietly. He shoved back from the table, pacing the small room like a caged animal. This is just... it's technicalities. Legal tricks. He whirled to face our parents. Are you really going to let her get away with this? But Ellen was already pulling out another document, this one bound in a crisp blue folder. This motion requests immediate reinstatement of the prior will, which was never legally revoked due to the invalid amendment. She slid it across the table. You'll note the supporting precedents are listed in Appendix B. I watched my father's hands shake as he reached for his reading glasses again. Mom still hadn't spoken, her face a mask of disbelief. The room felt smaller by the minute, crowded with unspoken accusations and crumbling plans. We can fight this, Jason insisted, but his voice had an edge of desperation now. There has to be... Section 473591 of the State Code. Ellen cut in smoothly, not even bothering to look up from her papers. I can continue citing relevant laws if you'd like, but I suggest we focus on resolving this situation properly. She turned to the notary. Would you be willing to witness signatures on these reinstatement documents? The notary nodded, already reaching for her stamp. Once the parties are ready, of course. My brother made a sound somewhere between a scoff and a snarl. Jana, you can't, this isn't. He took a step toward me, but Ellen cleared her throat. I wouldn't, she said quietly. Not with so many witnesses present. Something massive and powerful was rising in my chest. Vindication, justice, relief, all mixing together into a tidal wave of emotion. But I kept my face carefully neutral, my hands steady in my lap. I thought of all those Sunday dinners, all those times I'd swallowed my questions about their obvious favoritism. All the years I'd convinced myself that staying quiet meant staying good. Mark Linton was the first to actually move. He gathered his briefcase and coat, muttering something about consulting with his partners. Nobody bothered to acknowledge his exit. Mom, Jason tried one more time. Dad, you can't let her. Let me what? I finally spoke, my voice surprisingly calm. Follow the law? Protect what was legally mine before you tried to take it? The words felt clean, precise, like laying down cards in a winning hand. Dad set down the motion papers, his face gray. We should consult another attorney. Of course, Ellen agreed pleasantly. Though I should mention that any attorney you consult will find the same licensing issues and the same legal outcome. She began organizing her documents with practiced efficiency. I'll leave these copies with you. The motion will be filed with the court this afternoon. The notary had already packed up her supplies, clearly eager to distance herself from the situation. She gave a quick professional nod before slipping out the door. Mom finally found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. Jana, we never meant. But I didn't need to hear the rest. I'd spent years listening to their explanations, their justifications, their endless reasons why Jason's needs always came first. The time for those conversations was over. I stood up, smoothing my skirt with steady hands. The tidal wave of emotion was still there, but I'd learned long ago how to swim in deep waters. Ellen gathered her briefcase, and together we walked toward the door. You know how news travels in small towns, like honey dripping down a jar, slow but unstoppable. By Wednesday morning, 3 days after the showdown at the notary's office, the whispers had already started. I first noticed it at Mabel's coffee shop, where I'd stopped for my usual morning tea. Mrs. Peterson, who'd taught Sunday school with my mother for 15 years, gave me a long look over her reading glasses. She wasn't subtle about leaning over to whisper to her friend Barbara. I kept my eyes on my phone, pretending to check emails while their hushed conversation drifted across the room. Can you imagine? Their own daughter? Heard they tried to cut her out completely. After all those years, she took care of them. I stirred my tea, watching the amber liquid swirl. The familiar scent of cinnamon and bergamot took me back to countless morning conversations in the same cafe, listening to my mother brag about Jason's latest ventures. Funny how memories can turn bitter so quickly. By Friday, the ripples had reached the whole congregation. Pastor Mike's wife called me, ostensibly to check in, but I could hear the curiosity beneath her concern. I kept my responses minimal, professional. It's a private family matter, I told her. I'm sure you understand. The line went quiet for a moment before she made her excuses and hung up. My phone buzzed with a social media notification. Jason had posted again, his third rant this week. Some people pretend to be family until money's involved. Then they show their true colors. Betrayed, family drama. The comments section filled with his friends, most of whom had never met me, offering sympathy and outrage on his behalf. I didn't respond, didn't like, didn't share. Instead, I met with Ellen to start the property transfer paperwork. We sat in her office, surrounded by law books and the faint smell of coffee, methodically working through each document. Your brother's posts could actually help us, Ellen mentioned, sliding another form across her desk. Shows clear acknowledgement of the situation. Makes it harder for them to claim any misunderstanding later. I nodded, signing where indicated. My signature felt stronger now, more purposeful than the careful script I'd used on all those birthday cards and Christmas notes over the years. Mom tried calling twice that weekend. I let it go to voicemail both times. Her messages started confident, almost commanding. Jana, we need to discuss this as a family. By Sunday, her tone had shifted. Please, sweetheart. They're saying things. Yes, they were. At the grocery store, I overheard Mrs. Martinez telling the cashier how she'd seen my mother sitting alone at church, 3 rows back from her usual spot. Dad hadn't shown up at all. Their regular bridge group had suddenly developed scheduling conflicts. The Tuesday night Bible study found a different host. Jason's posts grew more erratic. Family betrayal cuts deep, he wrote at 2 a.m. But karma watches everything. Then, some sisters deserve what they get. His friends' supportive comments dwindled. A few even reached out to me privately, asking if he was okay. I didn't answer those messages either. Instead, I focused on the paperwork Ellen kept sending over: property titles, bank documents, insurance forms. Each signature brought me closer to making it official. "Your parents stopped by the office," Ellen told me during our next meeting. "Your father tried to argue about jurisdiction again." And? I showed him the State Bar Association's records. She smiled slightly. He left pretty quickly after that. The following week, I drove past the house. My house now, legally speaking. The garden looked neglected. Dead leaves scattered across the lawn. Through the front window, I caught a glimpse of moving boxes stacked in the living room. Mom's prized crystal vase, the one she'd always promised would be mine someday, glinted dully through the cardboard. Jason's car wasn't in the driveway anymore. According to his latest post, he'd taken a job offer 2 states away. "Fresh start," he wrote, "leaving toxic people behind." The photo showed him giving a thumbs up next to a U-Haul truck. It got 3 likes. I could have posted my own version of events, could have shared the legal documents, the proof of what they'd tried to do, could have responded to every whispered conversation with cold, hard facts. Instead, I stayed quiet, kept signing papers, let the truth spread on its own, honey slow and just as sticky. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any defense. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people discover who someone really is. And in a small town, they always do. The sharp knock at my door came just after 9. I knew who it was before I even checked. Jason had been texting all afternoon, his messages growing increasingly desperate. I took a slow breath, smoothed my sweater, and opened the door. "Come on, Jana." He pushed past me into the apartment, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. "This isn't you. You're not this person." I closed the door quietly and leaned against it, arms crossed. Which person would that be? This vindictive... He gestured wildly, pacing my small living room. The same room where we'd shared drinks just weeks ago, when he'd bragged about his plans for the house. "Look, I know Mom and Dad handled it badly, but we can fix this. Just call off your lawyer. We'll start over." My silence seemed to unnerve him. He stopped pacing and stared at me, his expression shifting from pleading to something harder. "You know what? This is exactly why they chose me." His voice rose. "You're so damn rigid. Everything has to be your way, by your rules. The perfect daughter who never makes mistakes, just judges everyone else's." I thought of all the Sunday dinners I'd cooked while he was finding himself in Colorado. The doctor's appointments I'd driven Dad to when Mom's arthritis acted up. The Christmas mornings I'd arrived early to help with preparations, only to watch them fawn over whatever last-minute gift Jason had managed to grab at the gas station. "They were trying to protect the family legacy," he continued, desperation creeping back in. "You've got your career, your life all figured out. I'm the one who needs a safety net." I kept my voice level. "Or just another bailout?" His face flushed. "You've always been jealous. Ever since we were kids, you couldn't stand that they loved me more. That should have hurt. Maybe once it would have." But I just watched him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. My little brother, the golden child, suddenly realizing his charm couldn't fix everything. "If you do this," he stepped closer, finger pointed at my chest. "If you take everything, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of sister you really are. I'll tell them all about how you stabbed your own family in the back." I met his gaze. "Are you finished?" He blinked, thrown by my calmness. Then his expression twisted. "This is all their fault anyway. You know that, right? They're the ones who promised me, who made it seem..." He ran both hands through his hair again, wiping at his eyes. "They set me up to fail, just like always." And there it was. The final shift. From begging to threats to blame. Classic Jason, never responsible for his own choices. "I think you should leave now." "Jana, please." "Goodbye, Jason." He stared at me for a long moment, perhaps waiting for me to crack, to show some hint of the compliant sister he'd always known. When I didn't, he stormed past me and yanked open the door. "You'll regret this," he said from the threshold. "When you're all alone in that big house, you'll realize what you threw away." I closed the door behind him with a soft click. My hands didn't shake as I pulled out my phone, scrolled to his contact, and pressed delete. Through the wall, I could hear him stomping down the hallway, his footsteps fading to silence. A week later, Mrs. Martinez mentioned seeing a U-Haul outside his apartment. "Moving to Indianapolis," she told me at the grocery store. "Some tech startup job," he said. Though between you and me, honey, it seemed rather sudden. The formal letter from my parents arrived the next day. Heavy cream-colored stationery, Dad's precise handwriting on the envelope. Inside, 2 pages of carefully worded paragraphs about family duty and reasonable compromises. They wanted to open a dialogue about reconsideration. I set the letter aside, unopened, and went to water my plants. Through my apartment window, I could see the first hints of fall touching the trees. Soon the leaves would turn, then fall, then give way to winter. Seasons change. People show their true colors. And sometimes silence is the only answer needed. The paint swatches spread across the kitchen counter like fallen leaves, warm sage, coastal fog, morning mist. I'd been staring at them for days, imagining how each shade would transform these walls that had witnessed so much. The painters were due tomorrow, and I still hadn't decided. Funny how the smallest choices can feel so weighted when you're rebuilding your life. I ran my fingers over the Sage Whisper sample one more time. Mom had always insisted on stark white walls, claiming anything else was trying too hard. Well, this house wasn't hers anymore. I circled the color decisively and picked up my phone to confirm with the painting crew. Remember those DIY shows where they tear down walls and reveal gorgeous hardwood in a single montage? Reality's messier. It took 3 solid weeks just to clear out decades of accumulated stuff. Every drawer held another memory I had to sort through, decide about, let go of. But slowly, deliberately, the house began to breathe again. I scrubbed baseboards until my knees ached, wearing old yoga pants and my hair tied back in a messy bun. The physical work felt good, like I was erasing years of calculated diminishment with every stroke. Mrs. Chen from next door brought over homemade dumplings one afternoon. "So good to see lights in the windows again," she said, pointedly not mentioning my parents. The sunflower seeds arrived on a Tuesday. I'd ordered them online, 3 different varieties, all guaranteed to grow tall and bright. Mom used to say they were common flowers for common people. That's exactly why I wanted them. Let them tower over her precious rose bushes, their happy faces following the sun. I spent a whole morning preparing the soil in the front yard. A few cars slowed as they passed, probably wondering what the disowned daughter was up to now. The rumors had evolved over the weeks. Some neighbors crossed the street rather than wave. Others made a point of being extra friendly, as if to signal whose side they were on. I kept my head down and planted my seeds row by careful row. "Those'll look real nice come summer," Mr. Peterson called from his porch. He'd lived across the street for 30 years, had watched Jason and me grow up. "Your daddy used to talk about putting in a vegetable garden, but your mama wouldn't hear of it." I nodded, not trusting myself to respond. It's strange how other people's memories of your family can feel both true and completely foreign at the same time. The painters transformed the interior in 4 days. Each room emerged softer, warmer, more mine. I moved through the spaces slowly, touching walls that no longer held the weight of conditional love. The kitchen's sage green made me smile every morning. The pale blue in the living room reminded me of early spring skies. The last box from the attic nearly broke me, though. It was filled with photo albums, the carefully curated history of our family. I found one from my college graduation. Everyone posed perfectly on the church steps. Mom's hand rested possessively on Jason's shoulder. Dad stood rigid in his Sunday suit. And there I was, diploma clutched tight, smile uncertain. My throat tightened as I studied our faces. We looked like a normal family. Happy even. But pictures lie, don't they? They capture the moment we want to show the world, not the quiet cuts that bleed beneath the surface. The donation box sat half full by the door. I placed the photo album inside without ceremony. Someone else could use the frame. Outside, the first tiny sunflower shoots had broken through the soil, determined little green fingers reaching for light. I knelt beside them, remembering how Mom used to joke that I was sturdy, like a weed. She'd meant it as criticism, but now I saw the truth in it. Weeds survive. They grow through concrete. They turn their faces to the sun and thrive despite everyone who tried to pull them up by the roots. The house creaked and settled around me as evening fell. Not with judgment anymore, but with possibility. Each clean corner, each freshly painted wall, each sprouting seed was a quiet declaration. This space is mine now. Every inch of it earned, not given. I opened windows that had been sealed for years, letting spring air sweep through rooms that had held their breath for too long. From the street, I could imagine how it looked. Warm lights glowing, new life stirring in the garden beds, a home slowly waking up to itself. The September air carried that perfect crispness. You know, the kind that makes your lungs feel clean and your skin tingle? I stood on the freshly painted porch, ceramic mug warming my palms, and just breathed. The raw cedar boards beneath my feet still held that sweet smell of new beginnings. Remember how I mentioned those sunflower seeds? Well, they'd done exactly what the package promised. 3 different varieties stretched toward the sky, their faces following the morning light like faithful worshippers. The tallest ones reached past the first-floor windows now, bobbing gently in the breeze. Some folks might call them imposing, but to me, they were a chorus line of quiet rebellion. I set my coffee on the porch rail and unfolded the deed I'd been carrying around all morning. The official stamp caught the sunlight, and my name, just mine, stood out in crisp black ink. Jana Morrigan, sole owner. No conditions, no strings, no silent expectations weighing down every corner. Mrs. Peterson walked her golden retriever past the house, lifting her hand in a warm wave. "Garden's looking gorgeous, Jana," she called out. I waved back, noting how her smile reached her eyes. It wasn't the hesitant, awkward acknowledgement I'd gotten used to in those first weeks after everything happened. This was respect, pure and simple. The front door still needed its final coat of forest green paint, but even unfinished, it looked right. Everything about the house felt different now. The shadows that used to lurk in corners had been chased away by fresh paint and open windows. Even the creaks in the floorboards seemed friendlier, like they were speaking just to me instead of echoing with decades of judgment. I settled into the porch swing, Dad's old throne as we used to call it. He'd spend hours out here, keeping watch over his domain like some small-town king. The chains needed oiling, their soft squeak marking each gentle sway. But I kind of liked the sound. It reminded me that everything changes, even things we think will last forever. A cardinal landed on the shepherd's hook where I'd hung my new wind chimes. The metal tube sang out a random melody, and I found myself humming along. When was the last time I'd done that? Just sat and hummed without wondering if someone would find it annoying? The morning sun caught the golden edges of the sunflowers, creating halos around their dark centers. Mom's roses were long gone, replaced by native plants that actually wanted to grow here. Black-eyed Susans dotted the borders, purple coneflowers nodded in clusters, and tall grasses added texture and movement. It wasn't a showcase garden designed to impress the neighbors. It was alive, authentic, thriving on its own terms. I took another sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through my chest. The betrayal that had once felt like swallowing broken glass had transformed into something else entirely. Not healed exactly, more like composted. All that pain and anger had broken down into something clean and useful. Fertile ground for a different kind of life. Last week, I'd heard through the grapevine that Jason had taken a job in Arizona. Dad's church friends had stopped asking about them at the grocery store. The whispers had died down to occasional murmurs, mostly tinged with something that sounded a lot like embarrassment on my parents' behalf. Their carefully curated social standing had crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. But you know what? I didn't feel an ounce of satisfaction in their downfall. I felt free. Free from the weight of their approval, free from the exhausting dance of being the good daughter while never being good enough. The deed in my hands wasn't just a piece of paper, it was permission to stop performing. The porch swing creaked again as I stood up. A fresh breeze rustled through the sunflowers, making their heavy heads bob like they were nodding in agreement. I smiled. Not from joy exactly, but from something deeper. Something final. "Don't bet against the quiet daughter," I whispered to the morning air, folding the deed with careful precision and tucking it into my pocket. The paper had done its job. The house was mine. The peace was mine. And the silence? Well, that had been my power all along. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.